For the last 4 years of my ministry, I have, unlike the first 20, had the opportunity to visit other congregations all over the Synod, and in fact across the United States. And I've seen some really, really great things, and a few things that were really pretty bad. And one of them, for instance, I was at a church, it was in New York, in Manhattan, and they wanted to introduce us as guests. And so they went around, and they asked us to stand, the guests, and then they went around Oprah Winfrey style with a microphone and said, "What's your name and where are you from?" And that was right near Broadway. I guess that was. And then there was another church that I went to that had, I think that they didn't want to embarrass us when we visited. So instead of having the guests stand, they asked everyone else to stand. And they sang us a little song. And that sounds so quaint. But what happens when everyone else stands is that you're at eye level with everybody's rear end. And it's just not the most flattering thing. So I have, in my travels, people often ask me, well, it's easy to talk about those kinds of things and to smile and laugh at them, but are there congregations that are growing in our Synod, Lutheran ones? And if there are there things that we can learn from them? And the answer is yes. There are some growing congregations, actually more than just one or two. In fact, in our Synod, we have 79 congregations and mission sites, and of those, 15 are growing. That's 18%, a little more than that. That's actually not a tiny little number. There are some things that we can see from those 15 congregations, and what I'm going to tell you about are my observations of those 15 congregations, combined with some observations that Bill Esom and Bill Tenney-Britton have put in a book called Effective Staffing for Vital Congregations. You don't have to write all this down. This will be on the website. You can get this information there. And a new study that the Church of England just did on this very subject called From Anecdote to Evidence. And they were looking for correlations between their number of churches that grow, which are about 18%, something like that. There are churches that are growing. What do they have in common? What are the practices that these churches are using that others maybe we can learn from? So I'm going to put all those together, but first I think we need to talk a little bit about growth itself. Because for many of us, growth in the church, we for some reason take it as a bad word. And it's not a bad word. In fact, it's a biblical word, to grow. It is God's hope and dream for the church that it grow. In the first church, Acts was added to the numbers of people day by day. Christ was with the fig tree that wasn't growing and producing fruit. In fact, he used the analogy of, he said, "I am the vine, you are the branches." And the branches that don't bear fruit get cut off. There is something about growth and health that is all through the Bible. And of course, this quote from Paul that said, he planted the seed, Apollos watered it, but God made it grow. And the truth is that none of us can make a church grow any more than we could make a tomato grow. All we can do is plant and water and care for it and do some things that, and then see if the Holy Spirit will gather people together and God will bring the growth. However, I think that we shy away from the word growth because all of us have seen churches that have been faithful and have not grown. And we've seen some churches that have, in their theology or in their practice perhaps, been in some ways unfaithful, and they've yet been very popular. And so we recoil from that word, growth. And yet it can't keep us from responding to the command of Christ to go to the whole world and make disciples. There are some churches, and sometimes when we may be repelled by this word, and we see growth in different ways. We talk about wanting there to be growth in the depth of our relationship with Christ and the love of God and our discipleship. And we want the church to grow in its doing good in the world and being a transformative force in the world. We want it to grow in peace and justice and in caring for the poor. We want all that to be true. But at least part of the fruit that God's calling us to bear, part of what the growth ought to be about from the Bible's perspective at least, is the growth in numbers of people who come to be a part of the body of Christ. Discipleship. Disciples. So let's get to it. What are some of the characteristics of churches that are growing numerically, with new people coming to church, more and more people coming to church? Of those 15, I define that by the parameter of growing by at least 5% a year over the last 3 years. So those are the 15. And what we see in there, first of all, this is from the Church of England. They said this, that these churches, their experience and mine, I would say, is that they are led by those who have the desire to see their churches grow. So this is my big idea for the day. Right? This is like a no-brainer. You're kicking yourself saying, what? Like, why? How can this be helpful? Because it's hard to find a pastor or a lay leader who wouldn't say they want their church to grow. Right? Everyone wants to see their church grow. What are you talking about? Well, I think that the difference is that there are those who say they want their church to grow and those who actually do the work needed to see new people come to it. It's like Bobby Knight said, who's a basketball coach, one of the most winning ones in history. He said, the key is not the will to win. Everybody has that. It is the will to prepare to win that's really important. And so it is for us in church. The thing is to have the will and the willingness to do the work that's needed to make this happen. We have to ask. Ask, and it will be given to you. Seek, and you will find. Knock, and the door will be opened to you. For everyone who asks receives, and the one who seeks finds, and the one who knocks, the door will be opened. In that are some things that we have to do. Ask, seek, knock. Plant the seed. Water it. Make disciples. There are some things for us to do. And God brings the growth. But if we're not doing them, it's not going to happen. And so we have to, in doing these things, let's talk about what are some of the things that need to be done. Well, again, from the Church of England, their conclusion was this. There is no single recipe for growth. There is no simple solution to decline. The road to growth depends on the context, and what works in one place may not work in another. What seems crucial is that congregations are constantly engaged in reflection and action, that they're willing to adapt and to change as they go. Churches will not thrive, it says, on autopilot. In other words, there's evidence, and this is not a correlation. This is real statistical evidence that shows that if you are a church that is just doing things by default, the chances are you will decline. In other words, if you just do things because that's the way we've always done it, if you just have everything from the worship style to everything that you do, if you're just doing it because it was handed to you and you keep doing it without really thinking about it, the chances are your church will decline. However, if you're willing to adapt, to look and see, and to do what Phyllis Tickle said, she said about every 500 years, the church has to have a rummage sale. And take out all the things that are in it and look at it and say, do we still want this? Like, is this really still helping us? Is this good? Or should we genesis it? Should we stop doing it? Should we let go of that tradition? Do those curtains really matter anymore? Is that really what we're about? Or what do we hold on to and what do we let go for the sake of the gospel? for making it real for people so they can connect to it and come in. So, a couple of things that didn't matter, and we know this quickly. One is worship. Worship style doesn't matter. There are churches that are formal and churches that are contemporary, that are growing across the spectrum. The other thing, and we've known this, the other thing is theological bent, liberal or conservative. Now, this is kind of strange for us because we always think it's those conservative evangelical congregations that make the gospel so easy. Those are the ones that are growing. And we can't grow because we preach the cross and Christ crucified. It turns out that that actually isn't a big distinguisher. There are churches all across the spectrum that are growing, both here and in the Church of England. And we've known this to be true because we've seen many of our young adults attend much more conservative evangelical churches and stay with them even though they know the theology doesn't hang true all the time. Why? Because their friends go there. And they'll hang it through with bad theology that doesn't hang true over time because of their friends being there. So, anyway, here's the thing. It all rises and falls on the leadership of the church. Whether or not a church grows consistently over time. While good pastoral leadership, I tell you, does not guarantee growth, I've never seen a church grow that didn't have a good leader. Pastors and key lay leaders need to be on the same page with their desire to see the church grow with new people coming into it. And this we see time and time again. Churches that are stable or declining have a disconnect between what the leader, the pastor, believes the church ought to be doing, and sometimes the pastor has it, and sometimes the lay leaders have it, but the pastor doesn't. And if they both don't have it, the church is not likely to grow. Churches that have both are in that subset of churches that are growing. Pastoral leadership and lay leadership that is on the same page with wanting to see the church grow among new people coming into it. They are spiritually and emotionally healthy people. They're the kind of leaders that when you look at, you say, I can learn something from that person. In fact, I want to live the kind of life that I see this person living. Not always easy, but there's something about them. They prioritize growth in what it is that they spend their time doing. And Jason's talk is so important about our tendency to spend time in our ministries that care for the poor. And I'm not saying, I would never say, stop doing that. The question is, what are we prioritizing? And we can't do all that we do there and neglect the gospel. Because if we do, we will be just like every other social service agency. And if we do, we may not have church anymore. These pastors develop and key lay leaders together develop a clear mission and purpose. They have a strength in motivating people. And a lot of times pastors get to a congregation and they are all gung-ho to go and do these things and connect with people in the community. And they have not taken people along with them and built that key group of lay leaders to help make this happen. Leadership also have clear expectations and accountability with staff and lay leaders. Their willingness to self-reflect and to adapt, to stop doing some things which really don't work. Okay. So, and then they involve lay leaders. So it's not just the pastors and those lay leaders, it's the whole church together. So here we go. What are they doing, really, that's different? This is the church of Hirsch. Vincent van Gogh painted it in June of 1890. The church has light all around it, but not within it. And most notably, it has no path, no door that goes into it, right? This was a month before Van Gogh took his own life out of despair and perhaps mental illness. And what pastors and these churches do that are growing is that they help people find a way in. And here are a couple of things that they do. I'm going to go through them real quickly. They have websites that are up to date and that are geared toward first-time guests that come to their churches. They have a way of inviting other people into their congregations. People are inviting people, not just to Sunday mornings. That's changing. Sunday morning may not be the first time when most people connect with our churches. It will often be maybe a barbecue or a habitat project or a Bible study that people get invited into out of a relationship that they have with one another. Again, all these things happen when you have that right leadership team. When they do come to church, they can easily connect with God in worship. And by this, I mean only that the distractions are eliminated, or at least kept low. And announcements are one of those key distractions that we fall into. People are not impressed by long periods of announcements in our congregations. They don't think, what a great church. They think, when am I going to get out? And prayers, and I know this is controversial, it's worth talking about, are not for every single person by name. They have prayer teams in these growing churches that are praying for people. But on Sunday morning, it may be one or two people that need prayer that are there. Sermons, we could do a whole talk on that. Sermons are to the point and help people know how the law and gospel help them in their daily life. All right, so there's no such thing as a friendly church for first-time guests. Let's just get that out there. The only thing we can do is make it less horrifyingly scary for them. So when they come in, they need a nursery, they need a bathroom. It's really easy to find those things. We're not overly friendly with them. We're not distant from them. It's kind of normal, and that's hard for people to achieve sometimes. The next step is clear. If they want to take the next step with your church community, there are lots of different ways you have to contextualize this for your own place, but the next step is clear, and there's good follow-up for guests. Within 24 hours, the pastor in some way follows up. Here's one of the real keys. People make friends. They need to make 6 to 8 new friends in your congregation within 90 days, or within 2 years, they'll be gone. People are discipled in the Christian life. I'm almost done. They're discipled in the Christian life, and Dietrich Bonhoeffer set the pace for us in this, and he wrote a book called The Cost of Discipleship and showed us some things on how to do it. I think we need to spend more time with this. The last thing is, from the pastor to the pew, people are getting out into the community just like Jesus did. And they're offering more than sandwiches to people. They're meeting their deepest need. Christ said, remember, he said that people came to be fed, the 5,000. And then he said afterward, he said to others, if you eat of this bread, you'll be hungry again. But you eat from me and you never will be. If you drink from this well, he said, that you'll be thirsty again. But if you drink from me, you won't be. We have a world that's hungry and thirsty for love and forgiveness and acceptance and the things of Jesus Christ. If we can put ourselves, the good news here, I think, is that if we can tune ourselves into doing these things, if we can care for the right reasons, because there are people out there that are hurting and lonely and need the love of Christ, if we can do that and actually begin to do these things, the chances are that not all will grow, but a lot will by the grace of God.